Clara's hands trembled as the iron box groaned open beneath the dim light of the basement, the air thick with the scent of damp stone and forgotten years. The letter inside, yellowed and brittle, felt like a shard of ice pressed against her palm, cold and unyielding. 50 years sealed away, untouched, yet the words spilled out with a cruel immediacy, as if the past had been waiting, biding its time to claw back into the present. She read the lines twice, then thrice, each word a knife twisting deeper into a wound she thought had long scabbed over. Recent disasters, fires that devoured the outskirts, crops that withered under a merciless drought, names she had known all her life etched in ink that seemed to bleed sorrow, the chilling warning, "Leave before it's too late, the town is no longer yours," echoed in her mind like a death knell, a prophecy that was no longer fiction but a living nightmare. The basement smelled of old wood, the chill biting through her thin cardigan, but it was the ache in her chest that froze her. This town, her home, her heaven, and her private hell was unraveling like a wound that refused to heal. The streets outside were emptying, neighbors packing in silence, their faces masks of disbelief and fear, as if the very soul of the place was slipping through their fingers like smoke. Clara felt the weight of abandonment settle over her like a shroud, a pain that seeped through the pores and became part of the blood. She thought of the broom in the kitchen corner of her childhood home, the shine of the sparse furniture, the scent of floor wax that once meant care and pride. Now, those small comforts felt like relics of a life slipping away, shadows of a time when hope still lingered in the air. The letter's words clawed at her mind. Who wrote this? How could it predict the past and the present with such eerie precision? Was it madness or something darker, a curse woven into the fabric of this forgotten town? Clara's breath hitched as the cold dread seeped deeper, mingling with the ache of abandonment that had haunted her since childhood. She remembered the stories told in hushed tones, the whispered warnings passed down like fragile heirlooms. But this was different. This was real. The town was no longer theirs, not hers, not anyone's. Outside, the wind whispered through the empty streets, carrying the scent of damp leaves and distant smoke, a mournful lullaby for a place slipping into oblivion. Clara stood alone on the cracked porch of her childhood home, the wood rough against her skin, the chill biting at her bones. Around her, the silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the rustle of leaves and the faint creak of a door swinging in the wind. Her mind raced, a storm of fear and defiance swirling in her chest. What fate awaited those who stayed? Could she bear to watch this town die, piece by piece, or was the warning a call to abandon everything she had ever loved? The questions clawed at her, relentless and merciless, leaving her suspended in a haunting silence that pressed against her heart like a vice. The letter lay heavy in her pocket, a secret too terrible to share, yet too urgent to ignore. The town was unraveling, and with it, Clara's fragile hope. The night deepened, the shadows lengthened, and the wind whispered again, carrying a promise or a threat that the story was far from over. What came next would not be mercy. It would be a reckoning. Clara's hands trembled as the old metal box creaked open beneath the dim basement light, the air thick with the scent of damp concrete and years left to rot. The letter inside, yellowed and fragile, felt like a shard of ice pressed against her palm, cold and merciless. 50 years locked away untouched, yet the words spilled out with a brutal immediacy, as if the past had been waiting, biding its time to claw back into the present. She read the lines twice, then 3 times, each word twisting like a knife deeper into a wound she thought had long since scabbed over. Recent disasters, wildfires that swallowed the outskirts, crops shriveled under a merciless drought, names she'd known all her life inked in sorrow. The chilling warning, "Leave before it's too late, this town is no longer yours," echoed in her mind like a death knell, a prophecy no longer fiction, but a living nightmare. The basement smelled of old wood and mildew, the chill biting through her thin cardigan. But it was the ache in her chest that froze her. This town, her home, her heaven, and her private hell was unraveling like a wound that refused to heal. Outside, the streets were emptying, neighbors packing in silence, their faces masks of disbelief and fear, as if the very soul of the place was slipping through their fingers like smoke. Clara felt the weight of abandonment settle over her like a shroud, a pain that seeped through the pores and became part of her blood. She thought of the broom in the kitchen corner of her childhood home, the shine of the sparse furniture, the scent of floor wax that once meant care and pride. Now those small comforts felt like relics of a life slipping away, shadows of a time when hope still lingered in the air. The letter's words clawed at her mind. Who wrote this? How could it predict the past and the present with such eerie precision? Madness? Or something darker, a curse woven into the fabric of this forgotten town? Clara's breath hitched as the cold dread seeped deeper, mingling with the ache of abandonment that had haunted her since childhood. She remembered the stories told in hushed voices, whispered warnings passed down like fragile heirlooms. But this was different. This was real. The town was no longer theirs. Not hers, not anyone's. Outside, the wind whispered through the empty streets, carrying the scent of damp leaves and distant smoke, a mournful lullaby for a place slipping into oblivion. Clara stood alone on the cracked porch of her childhood home, the rough wood biting into her skin, the chill gnawing at her bones. Around her, silence stretched heavy and suffocating, broken only by the rustle of leaves and the faint creak of a door swinging in the wind. Her mind raced, a storm of fear and defiance swirling in her chest. What fate awaited those who stayed? Could she bear to watch this town die, piece by piece, or was the warning a call to abandon everything she had ever loved? The questions clawed at her, relentless and merciless, leaving her suspended in a silence that pressed against her heart like a vice. The letter lay heavy in her pocket, a secret too terrible to share, yet too urgent to ignore. The town was unraveling, and with it, Clara's fragile hope. The night deepened, shadows lengthened, and the wind whispered again, carrying a promise, or a threat, that the story was far from over. Then, as Clara turned to step inside, her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. She hesitated, heart pounding, then opened it. The screen displayed a single photo, a grainy image of her mother sitting at the kitchen table, eyes wide and hollow, clutching a faded photograph. But the date stamp froze Clara's blood. It was taken just an hour ago. Her breath caught. Her mother had been dead for 10 years. The message beneath the photo read, "You don't know the whole story. Come to the old mill, tonight, alone." Clara's hands shook violently, the letter burning in her pocket. The past wasn't just clawing back, it was reaching through time itself, dragging secrets from graves she thought were sealed forever. Her home, her heaven, her private hell, everything she believed shattered in that instant. The town was no longer hers, and now neither was the truth. The reckoning had begun. Clara's breath hitched, the cold basement air suddenly too thin to fill her lungs. The photo on her phone glowed like a ghost's lantern, casting eerie shadows on the cracked walls around her. Her mother's hollow eyes, empty yet accusing, stared back at her, a mirror of a pain Clara had buried deep beneath years of silence and denial. It wasn't possible. It couldn't be. Yet the date stamp burned like a brand, taken an hour ago. Her fingers trembled, the letter in her pocket suddenly heavier than the world. The basement's musty scent twisted into something acrid, like smoke and old secrets burning just beneath the surface. Clara's heart pounded a frantic rhythm, each beat a hammer striking the fragile glass of her sanity. She wanted to scream, to run, to deny the impossible. But the message was clear. You don't know the whole story. Come to the old mill. Tonight, alone. The words slithered into her mind, wrapping around her like chains forged in betrayal. The old mill, the place where her father had disappeared without a trace, where whispered rumors of darkness and madness had haunted the town for decades. It was a place she had sworn never to return to, a place where the past wasn't just remembered but lived, breathed, and twisted into nightmares. Clara's legs moved before her mind could catch up, carrying her through the empty streets that seemed to hold their breath, waiting. The wind clawed at her coat, the chill gnawing at her bones. But it was the silence that screamed loudest, the silence of a town that had already lost its soul. As she approached the mill, the broken windows like empty eye sockets, a sickening realization settled over her. The letter, the disasters, the warning, they were all threads in a tapestry far darker than she had ever imagined. The town wasn't just unraveling, it was being unmade, piece by something ancient and merciless. Inside, the air was thick with decay and forgotten memories. The floorboards groaned beneath her feet, each step echoing like a heartbeat in the cavernous darkness. Then a flicker of movement, a shadow shifting in the corner. "Clara," a voice whispered, ragged and broken. She froze. The voice was hers, or was it her mother's? A figure stepped into the dim light, face obscured but unmistakably familiar. The woman's eyes, alive, burning with a fierce, terrible clarity, locked onto Clara's. "I never left," she said, voice trembling with a mixture of sorrow and rage. "They buried me, but I'm still here, waiting." The ground beneath Clara seemed to dissolve, the world tilting into chaos. The mother she had mourned, the stories she had told herself to survive, they were lies. Or worse, half-truths hiding a darkness that had swallowed the town whole. "You think this is about the town?" the woman continued, stepping closer, the scent of damp earth and something metallic clinging to her like a second skin. "It's about what they did to us, to me, to you." Clara's mind shattered into 1,000 shards, each one cutting deeper than the last. The letter, the disasters, the empty streets. They were symptoms of a wound far deeper, a betrayal so profound it threatened to consume everything she held dear. Her mother's ghost wasn't a memory. It was a warning, a reckoning. And as the shadows closed in, Clara realized the nightmare wasn't behind her. It was inside her. It was her. The truth she had been running from wasn't just about the town. It was about blood, betrayal, and a darkness that had lived in her veins all along. The wind howled outside, carrying the scent of damp leaves and distant smoke, but inside the mill, Clara's world had collapsed into silence. She was no longer just a witness to the town's unraveling. She was the story, and the story was far from over. Clara's knees buckled as the woman's words hung in the stale air, thick and suffocating like smoke that never quite clears. The dim light from the cracked window caught the glint in her mother's eyes, a fierce, terrible clarity that shattered every fragile truth Clara had clung to. The basement's icy chill was nothing compared to the cold that seeped into her bones now, a freezing realization that clawed at her heart like a rabid animal. "I never left," the woman whispered again, voice trembling but unyielding. "They buried me, but I'm still here, waiting." Clara's breath hitched, a scream caught in her throat, the weight of decades pressing down like a tombstone. She wanted to run, to tear away from this nightmare, but her feet were rooted to the rotten floorboards, her mind spiraling into a darkness she had never dared to imagine. Then a sudden sharp sound, metal scraping against wood, cut through the silence. Clara's eyes darted to the far corner of the mill, where a rusted trapdoor groaned open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into blackness. "Wait," her mother said, voice barely audible but fierce as a storm. "There's something you need to see." Clara's heart hammered against her ribs as she followed, each step down the stairs a descent into a pit of dread. The air grew colder, the scent of damp earth and decay thickening until it felt like it would choke her. At the bottom, the narrow cellar opened into a cavernous room, walls lined with shelves heavy with dust-covered jars and faded photographs. But it was the center of the room that stole Clara's breath. A crude wooden table, stained and scarred, where a collection of old documents lay scattered. She knelt, fingers trembling as she picked up a faded ledger, its pages brittle but filled with names she recognized. Names of townsfolk who had vanished over the years, erased from memory like ghosts wiped from the fabric of time. Her mother's voice broke the silence again, low and raw. They didn't just leave, they were taken, all of them, and it's been going on for generations. Clara's head spun, the pieces of the puzzle twisting into a nightmare she couldn't escape. Who? Who did this? The woman's eyes darkened, shadows pooling in their depths. Not who, what? A sudden guttural sound echoed from the darkness beyond the cellar, a low, rasping breath that wasn't human. Clara's skin crawled as the temperature plunged, the air thickening with a presence ancient and hungry. Her mother stepped back, voice trembling, but resolute. This town was built on a lie, on a pact made long ago. They traded us, our souls, our futures, to something that feeds on fear and silence. The disasters, the disappearances, they're just the surface. The wound beneath is alive. Clara's hands shook violently, the ledger slipping from her grasp and thudding against the floor. The letter in her pocket burned like fire, the warning now a scream in her mind. Then, the cellar door slammed shut with a thunderous crash. Darkness swallowed them whole. And in that suffocating black, Clara understood the most devastating truth of all. The reckoning was not coming from outside. It was rising from within, from the blood that ran through her veins. From the secret she had carried unknowingly all her life. The nightmare was not just the town's, it was hers, and it was awakening. Clara's breath caught in her throat as the cellar door slammed shut behind them, the echo bouncing off the damp stone walls like a gunshot in a tomb. Darkness pressed in, thick and suffocating, swallowing the flicker of light from her trembling hands. The acrid scent of earth and decay wrapped around her like a shroud, cold fingers brushing against her skin, seeping into her bones. Her mother's presence beside her was no comfort, only a raw wound, a living ghost tethered to a truth too monstrous to bear. "I'm sorry," the woman whispered, voice cracking like dried twigs underfoot. "I should have told you sooner." Clara's heart hammered, a wild thing trapped in a cage of ribs. "Told me what?" she demanded, voice brittle, barely more than a plea. Her mother's eyes glistened with a sorrow that felt like a blade twisting in Clara's chest. "You're not who you think you are. You never were." The words fell like stones, heavy and final. Clara's mind reeled, trying to grasp the shape of the betrayal, the depth of the abyss opening beneath her feet. "What do you mean? I'm your daughter. I grew up here. This is my home." The woman's gaze darkened, a storm gathering in their depths. "You're the reason this town is dying, the reason the curse never lifted. You carry it in your blood." Clara staggered back, the cellar floor pitching beneath her like a ship caught in a tempest. "No, that's impossible." A bitter laugh escaped her mother's lips, hollow and haunted. "Impossible? You were born from the pact. Not just a victim, but the vessel, the one who binds the darkness to this place." The air shifted, a cold breath rising from the shadows, whispering secrets older than memory. Clara's fingers clawed at her chest, desperate to hold on to the fragments of her shattered identity. "I don't understand. You never did," her mother said, stepping closer, the scent of damp earth and iron thickening. "Your father wasn't just a man who disappeared. He was the one who sealed the deal. And you, born from that unholy union, are the key, the curse's heart, beating beneath the surface." Clara's vision blurred, the walls closing in, the weight of generations pressing down like a tombstone. "So what? I'm supposed to be some monster, some curse? Her mother's hands reached out, trembling but steady. No, you're the last chance. The reckoning isn't just destruction, it's choice. You can break the cycle or let it consume everything. A sudden chilling sound echoed from the darkness. A low, guttural growl that wasn't human, a promise of hunger and despair. The jars on the shelves rattled, shadows twisting into shapes that danced just beyond sight. Clara's breath hitched, terror and defiance warring in her chest. The letter in her pocket burned hotter than ever, a searing brand against her skin. The warning was no longer just about the town. It was about her, about what she was meant to be and what she could still become. Her mother's voice softened, a fragile thread in the oppressive dark. You have to decide, Clara. Will you run or will you fight? The silence that followed was a living thing, heavy and watchful. Clara's world had shattered, the ground beneath her a fractured mirror reflecting a truth too terrible to face. But beneath the fear, a fragile ember flickered, a spark of something fierce and unyielding. She was no longer just a daughter, a witness, or a victim. She was the reckoning, and the story was only beginning. Clara's breath trembled in the suffocating dark, the cellar's cold seeping into her bones like a slow poison. Her mother's words echoed, heavy and relentless. She was the curse's heart, the living tether binding the town's fate to a darkness older than memory. The low growl from the shadows pulsed like a heartbeat, a reminder that the nightmare was no longer distant. It was inside her, alive and waiting. Her fingers curled around the letter in her pocket, the paper scorching through the fabric of her coat. The warning wasn't just a message, it was a verdict. The weight of generations pressed down, but beneath the crushing despair, a flicker of defiance sparked. She wasn't ready to surrender to the darkness. Then what do I do? Clara's voice cracked, raw and desperate, a fragile thread stretched thin. How do I break it? Her mother's eyes softened for a fleeting moment, the fierce clarity replaced by a deep, aching sorrow. There's a way, but it's not what you think. The pact, it's not just a curse. It's a promise, a choice made long ago, and one you must face alone. Clara's heart stuttered. Alone. The words slammed into her like a fist. Alone? You brought me here. You said I had a choice. The woman's lips twisted into a bitter smile, shadows deepening in the corners of her mouth. I brought you here to tell you the truth. The rest is yours to bear. A sudden sharp clang shattered the silence. The trapdoor above slammed open. Blinding light spilled down the stairs, slicing through the darkness like a blade. Clara squinted, shielding her eyes. Clara, a voice called, frantic and familiar. It's me! Jake, we've been looking everywhere for you. Her mother's face twisted with something unreadable. Fear, anger, before she stepped back into the shadows, vanishing like smoke. Clara's mind reeled. Jake, the town's sheriff, her childhood friend, the one person she thought she could trust. But why was he here? How had he found her? And what did he know? She scrambled up the stairs, the letter burning in her palm, her heart pounding a wild rhythm of hope and dread. As she broke into the moonlit street, Jake grabbed her arm, eyes wide with urgency. They're coming, Clara, he gasped. The others, the ones who made the pact. They never left. They've been watching, waiting for you to make your move. Clara's breath hitched, the world tilting beneath her. The others? Who are they? Jake's gaze darted nervously over his shoulder. The families. The ones who keep the town alive with their secrets and their silence. They're not just ghosts, they're alive, and they want the curse to continue. A cold dread settled over Clara like a shroud. The town wasn't just cursed, it was a prison, held together by lies, blood, and a pact that demanded sacrifice. And now, she was the key to it all. Why me? She whispered, voice breaking. Why am I the reckoning? Jake's grip tightened, his eyes fierce. Because you're the last of the bloodline, the one who can end it or doom us all. Suddenly the ground beneath them trembled, a deep rumble rising from the earth like a beast awakening. The wind howled through the empty streets, carrying a scent that made Clara's stomach turn. Smoke, decay, and something far worse. From the shadows, figures emerged, faces half hidden, eyes gleaming with cold fire. The families, the watchers, the keepers of the pact. And at their head, a figure stepped forward, cloaked, face obscured but unmistakably familiar. Clara's breath caught. The silhouette moved with a terrible grace, and as the hood fell back, her blood froze. It was her father, alive and smiling. The reckoning was no longer a choice. It was a confrontation, and Clara was standing at the heart of a war she never knew had begun. Clara's breath hitched, the tremor in her chest a fragile thread stretched thin as the figure before her stepped fully into the moonlight. Her father's face, etched with lines she'd only seen in faded photographs and whispered memories, was alive, real, and impossibly present. The smile curling at the edges of his lips was not the warm, comforting smile of a lost parent returning home. It was cold, sharp, a blade wrapped in silk. Her knees threatened to buckle, the ground beneath her a shifting mirage. The weight of everything, the letter, the curse, the pact, pressed down, but it was this moment that shattered her world like glass underfoot. The man she'd mourned for a decade, the ghost haunting every lonely night, was not a victim. He was the architect. "Dad?" Her voice cracked, a fragile plea swallowed by the night. He stepped closer, eyes glinting with something ancient and terrible. "Clara, you've been carrying a lie your whole life. The truth is darker than you imagined." Jake's grip tightened on her arm, a silent anchor in the storm, but Clara barely noticed. Her father's presence was a tidal wave, drowning every certainty she'd ever held. "I never left because I was never meant to," he said, voice low and resonant, like the rumble of distant thunder. "The pact wasn't just a deal, it was a blood oath. I bound myself and you to this town's fate." Clara's mind screamed, the pieces of her shattered identity cutting deeper than any wound. "You're the curse?" The words tasted like poison. He nodded slowly, the smile never fading. "I am the curse, and you are the reckoning, the final piece." The air thickened, the scent of damp earth and decay, replaced by something metallic, sharp, fear bleeding into the night. The watchers behind her stirred, their faces masks of cold expectation, but Clara's eyes never left her father's. "Why?" she whispered, tears blurring her vision. "Why do this? Why sacrifice us all?" His gaze softened for a heartbeat, a flicker of something lost in the shadows. "Because without it, the darkness consumes everything. The pact holds it at bay. But it demands a price, a sacrifice, and you were born to pay it." A sudden guttural growl rose from the earth beneath them, the ground trembling like a beast awakening from a long slumber. The watchers moved forward, their eyes burning with hunger and dread. Jake's voice was a desperate whisper. "Clara, you have to choose. Break the pact, and the darkness will devour us all. Keep it, and you lose yourself." Her father's smile widened, cruel and knowing. "The reckoning isn't salvation. It's destruction, and only you can decide which." Clara's heart shattered, the blood in her veins a wildfire of fear and defiance. The letter's warning seared in her pocket, a promise of doom and hope tangled in the same breath. She looked at the faces around her, the watchers, Jake, her father, and felt the weight of a legacy she never wanted, but could never escape. The night held its breath, and Clara knew the truth that would haunt her forever. The reckoning was not just a choice. It was a war for her soul, and the battle had only just begun. Clara's knees trembled beneath her, the cracked pavement of the town square rough and unforgiving against her skin as she faced the circle of watchers. The moon hung low, a pale witness to the gathering storm, its cold light casting long shadows that twisted like serpents around the faces she once called neighbors. Jake stood close, his grip a lifeline, but even his presence couldn't anchor her from the whirlpool of dread and disbelief pulling her under. Her father's smile, the cruel, knowing curve of it, was a blade slicing through the fragile veil of hope she'd clung to. The pact, the curse, the blood oath. It was all a cage she'd been born into, a destiny sealed before her first breath. She had thought the reckoning was a choice, a chance to fight or flee. Now it was clear. It was a sentence, a war waged in the marrow of her bones. Then the air shifted. A sudden, sharp crack split the silence, like the snap of a whip. The watchers stiffened, eyes flickering toward the edge of the square where the shadows pooled deepest. Clara's heart hammered, a wild drumbeat drowning out the night's whispers. From the darkness emerged a figure, slow and deliberate. Not cloaked, not masked, just a woman, her hair wild and tangled, eyes blazing with a fire that burned through the cold night. Her voice cut through the tension, raw and fierce. "You think you understand the curse? The pact? You're all fools." The watchers tensed, hands moving toward hidden weapons, but the woman raised a hand, stopping them like a storm halting the sea. Clara's breath caught. The woman's face was achingly familiar, too familiar. It was her own face, but older, hardened by years of pain and secrets. The woman stepped forward, eyes locking onto Clara's with a piercing intensity that shattered the night's fragile calm. "I am you. The you that should have been. The you that was stolen." Clara's mind spiraled, the world fracturing into shards of impossible truth. What? What do you mean?" The woman's voice dropped, a whisper that echoed in the hollows of Clara's soul. The pact wasn't just blood and sacrifice. It was a split, a fracture in time itself. "I am the shadow of the choice you never made, the path you never took." The watchers murmured, confusion rippling through their ranks, but Clara was rooted to the spot, the weight of revelation crashing down like a tidal wave. "You're me? From the future?" The woman nodded, a sad smile touching her lips. "Or perhaps the past, or a broken possibility. Time is a wound, Clara, and the curse is the scar." A cold wind swept through the square, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and burning leaves, the scent of endings and beginnings entwined. "I came back to warn you," the woman said, stepping closer, her eyes blazing with desperate hope. "The pact can be broken, but only if you choose to shatter the cycle completely. Not just fight it, not just accept it, destroy it, even if it means destroying yourself." Clara's breath hitched, the letter in her pocket suddenly searing hot, a beacon of both doom and salvation. Jake's voice was a ragged whisper beside her. "What does she mean? How can this be?" The woman's gaze flicked to him, sharp and unyielding. "Because the curse isn't just blood or magic. It's a wound in time, a fracture that traps you all in a loop of pain and sacrifice. The reckoning isn't just a battle, it's the breaking of that loop." Clara's world spun, the lines between past, present and future blurring into a storm of fear and possibility. The watchers closed in, their faces masks of fury and fear, but Clara's eyes never left the woman who was her, yet not. The night held its breath once more, and Clara realized the truth that shattered every certainty. The reckoning was not just a war for her soul, it was a war for time itself. And the enemy was not just outside, it was inside her, inside every moment she had lived and every moment yet to come. The story was no longer just beginning, it was unraveling across the very fabric of reality, and Clara's choice would echo through every fractured second. Clara stood frozen in the town square, the cool night air thick with tension and the scent of damp earth. Around her the watchers, those shadowy figures bound by blood and silence, closed in, their faces hard and unyielding. But it wasn't their presence that rooted her to the spot. It was the woman before her, herself yet not, eyes blazing with a fierce urgency that cut through the darkness like a knife. The future, Clara's words echoed in her mind, a challenge and a plea tangled into one. To break the cycle, to shatter the pact, even if it meant losing everything. The weight of generations pressed down on her chest, but beneath the crushing despair, a fierce ember sparked to life. This wasn't just about survival, it was about reclaiming the story that had been stolen from her. Jake's hand found hers, steady and warm, grounding her in the storm. "We don't have to let this end like this," he whispered, voice raw with hope and fear. "You can change it. We can change it." Clara's breath hitched, the letter burning in her pocket like a beacon. She thought of the vanished neighbors, the whispered secrets, the darkness that had clawed its way through her family for decades. But she also thought of the small moments, the laughter, the stubborn hope, the stubborn fight that refused to die. With a sudden, fierce resolve, Clara stepped forward, voice strong despite the tremor beneath it. No more sacrifices, no more silence. This ends now. The watchers stiffened, shock rippling through their ranks like a wave. The air crackled, the night holding its breath as the impossible began to unfold. Time seemed to bend, the edges of reality blurring and twisting, the fracture in the fabric of the town pulsing like a heartbeat. Her other self nodded, a sad smile touching her lips. "You're ready, but it won't be easy. The darkness fights harder when it's cornered." Clara met the gaze of her father, the architect of the curse, standing at the edge of the circle. His smile faltered, uncertainty flickering in his eyes for the first time. The power that had seemed so absolute was cracking. A sudden gust swept through the square, scattering leaves and whispers alike. The watchers hesitated, the spell of fear breaking. Clara raised the letter, the symbol of the past and the key to the future. "This town is ours, not because of a curse, but because of the choices we make. I choose to fight, to heal, to break the cycle." The darkness recoiled, a low growl fading into silence. The watchers lowered their weapons, the weight of generations lifting like a morning mist. Jake squeezed her hand, a smile breaking through the tension. "You did it." Clara felt the chill in her bones begin to thaw, the night's heavy silence giving way to a fragile dawn. The reckoning had come, not as destruction, but as a chance to rewrite the story. As the first light touched the cracked pavement, Clara looked around at the town she loved, broken, battered, but still breathing. The past was a shadow, but the future was hers to shape. And somewhere deep inside, she knew this was only the beginning of a new kind of fight. The story wasn't over, it was just changing, and Clara was ready. You need to subscribe now to catch every twist and secret in this epic tale. This is the moment to show your support. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and keep the story alive. Don't hold back. Flood the comment section with your reactions, your theories, your wildest guesses about what comes next. And don't wait even one more second to share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need to know how this ends. Only true fans understand the power of standing together, so make your voice heard.